I'm Damian Bassich, the host of the California Frontier podcast. In part one of my interview with Father Paul Mark Swan, the Abbot of the Monastery of New Clairvaux, we left off where he was explaining how William Randolph Hearst, the famous newspaper magnate of the early 20th century, had brought a medieval monastery, stone by stone, to San Francisco's Golden Gate Park, and the difficulties he encountered because of the Great Depression. So we're going to pick up with the story of this stone church sitting in Golden Gate Park and how it made its way to the Abbey of New Clairvaux in Vina, California. We're going to learn how it was rebuilt as a Romanesque/Gothic church, and then later how the Abbey also entered into the California wine industry. I think you're going to enjoy it. So without further ado, let's get back to my interview with Abbot Paul Mark Swan of New Clairvaux. So the city actually had plans.
The city had plans
of its own.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, there were several fires, and some of these warehouses burnt down, and the stones were in these warehouses, and it just became a mess. The way it was dismantled and numbered, all that got lost, and so the city just took these stones and really put them in piles there in Golden Gate Park, where they sat for several decades, and kids would play on them. And some of them, the park itself began to utilize for different places in the park. The most notable place is the Japanese tea gardens. They have chapter house stones as part of the landscaping there.
To this day.
To this day.
I didn't know that.
And then there's some rose gardens as well that use some of the stones, again, as landscaping, to landscape the area of the rose garden. Some very beautiful stones from the chapter house.
Yeah, I remember hearing, I lived in San Francisco, in the 80s and 90s, and I remember hearing about the stones there in Golden Gate Park, and I remember thinking, holy cow, that's incredible. But I never actually saw any of them. Well, I have been to the Rose Garden, to the Japanese tea gardens, but I wasn't aware that those stones were there. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah. So at any rate, it was apparent the city would never be able to do anything with these stones. And then, when we were founded in 1955, one of the founding groups, he was a young monk, age 21. He and another monk came out 2 months after the original group arrived, and they flew out. And the founding superior met them at the San Francisco airport and says, before we drive up to Vina, I'm going to take you to Golden Gate Park. I'm going to show you stones that once belonged to us in Spain in the 12th century. And this young monk, who's still living, he's 91 years old, Father Thomas Davis.
Wow.
He saw the stones. He had just completed a course on Cistercian architecture and history at the Mother House of Gethsemane. And so he knew the value of these stones, and it was his vision, his desire, whatever it was. I don't think he said anything out loud, but he thought to himself, someday we have to get these stones to Vina, restore them, and return this chapter house to its pristine condition and make it a part of who we are at Vina. So, long story short, he kept an eye on these stones, and they were greatly. A lot of people in San Francisco, surprisingly, had a lot of interest and devotion to these stones in their own right. It's interesting because some of them knew something about the story of their sacred purpose, at least originally. But at any rate, in 1992, we just finally decided to do something about it. And so Father Thomas, as abbot, he was my predecessor as abbot here, goes down to the city of San Francisco, and the De Young Museum is involved, and Golden Gate Park is involved, and makes this plea for these stones. And a long story short, 2 years later, going through due process, which the city had to follow, the stones were awarded to us. And so in 1994, 19 truckloads of stone, big, these big freight trucks that you see on the, those kinds of trucks, delivered 19 loads of stone. And so then we had to begin raising money, because every stone had to be measured and tested, for its strength and its ability to continue to function as in building. Because a lot of them were damaged. A lot of these stones were damaged.
Now, did you have to, or did the monastery have to pay the city for the stones or for transporting them, or did they give them to you?
The city the city had to offer the stones to 3 different entities to sell. No entity was interested in purchasing the stones. So then, by law, they had the right to award the stones. So they gave them to us. Basically said, good luck. You can have these stones. We did have to, we had to load them ourselves, but the trucking company, a local trucking company, was making, trips down to San Francisco and coming back with empty trucks. And they said, we'll do this free because we've got to load up our trucks and make it worthwhile.
That's amazing.
So it was a donation in kind in that sense, yeah.
That's incredible. Do you have any idea off the top of your head how much one of these individual stones might weigh?
Yeah, we've talked about that before. Of course, it depends. Some of them are larger, some of them are smaller. I would say the average size certainly is several hundred pounds.
Wow.
Somewhere around 200 pounds. I mean, they're heavy.
So we're talking tons.
Yes, we are. And we still have kind of a barn full of stones, unused stones, because Hearst brought a lot of stone, not just the chapter house stones, but other stone from other parts of the monastery over. So we were able to use some of the other stone as to recarve where we needed missing or damaged carved chapter house stones. So approximately 35% of the stones you see in the current church, we turned it into our church, are original, and another 35% are carved from stone, from other parts of that monastery that could not be used for any other purpose here. So about 70% of the stone is medieval and comes from the monastery. Another 30% would come from a Texas quarry of limestone. So about 30% of it is American. Yeah.
So you used those stones to build or to rebuild, I'm not sure, maybe you can tell us, the church that you actually use now at the monastery.
Yes. It took us 2 years to undergo this study that included engineering studies on the stones. And because every stone had to be measured in every dimension, and they had to be put into a computer program. And these computer programs had just been developed. This is, 1994. And it's the computer that put everything together for us and said, this stone goes here, this stone goes there. We would have been able to still restore the chapter house, but it would take that many more years and that many more millions of dollars without the computer program. So I'm kind of, I'm all for, high tech. I have to say it's helpful. I suppose it has its downside, but at any rate, so that took a good 2 years, and then it took another 8 years to repair or recarve all the necessary stones we needed. And that was a stonemason from Stuttgart, Germany, that did that work. And it took him 8 years. So in 2003, we were finally able to break ground and begin construction. And 15 years later, we finally finished the project and dedicated it. So it took us really from 1992 to 2018, this whole process. It took us 26 years.
So that's really recent. I didn't realize that the whole church had been finished just in the last few years.
Yeah. Our work was progressing on it, so there was something since 2003. But for a number of years, it just stood as kind of a hollow, empty shell. Because, of course, obviously we have to meet earthquake codes. So there's a lot of concrete and steel. You don't know that when you look at the medieval part. It's just all stone. But in actual fact, there's steel and concrete behind those walls and up in the ceiling, it's designed for a 9.2.
Wow.
We had MIT came in. It cost an arm and a leg, but they came in for earthquake code stuff, because this is all stone, right?
Right.
You were asking how heavy each of these stones is. So every stone that you see in that church, you don't see it, but in the hidden spaces up in the roof, every stone is hooked to a steel strap, hooked to steel girders up in the attic. So in the event that an earthquake like that, that size, which we hope we never have to experience, but that chapter house is going to still stand. Those stones are just going to just shake a little. It's a solid building, to say the least, But historically, it took from 1190 to 1215 to complete the chapter house. It took them 25 years in the medieval era to do this.
So you have the story of the original monastery itself as well. So you know the backstory to that edifice.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have that. We've done a lot of research. And in fact, the gentleman that served as a consultant on the restoration of this project from Spain, he had done his master thesis in architectural history on this chapter house of Ovila, even though it was already here in the U.S. at the time. And this gentleman was a state employee of Spain who oversaw historical preservation and restoration of historical monuments in Spain. So he was just a godsend to have us on this project, because he knew so much about the project.
How did you find him?
He found us.
Oh,
He
really?
was always interested in these stones. His wife was a native of San Francisco, so he would always visit these stones. And so he knew the story. And then he found out this Cistercian monastery had received them, and he was just ecstatic. And so he offered his services free to be a consultant, and he came in very, very helpful. Now, having said that, that was Dr. Jose Miguel Caceres Marino. Okay, but meanwhile, here in San Francisco, another doctor, Dr. Margaret Burke, had done a lot of research and study on the stones. So she was very involved as well. Now both of these never saw the completion of this chapter house.
Really?
They both died before see it, which was unfortunate. But anyway, but that's the mystery of, I think it took us all these years, and it brought us back into the mindset of medieval times and how construction was, because not that much has changed other than the tools used are power operated, hydraulic operated, but it's the same tools. And it took the same amount of time. It was painstaking, and as the stonemasons put things together, they discovered things that the computer could not have anticipated. And they had to go back to the drawing board more than once, saying, wait a minute, these stones aren't, moving in the right direction we thought they would be moving, kind of thing. And there's a second stonemason who was also from Stuttgart in Germany, because Americans just don't study stone masonry like they do in Europe, because we don't have that many stone buildings. But at any rate, in a sense, we corrected things that in the late 12th century, early 13th century, their approach to engineering was different, or they made mistakes and they had to rectify it.
Oh, okay.
But he said, well, don't call what they did mistakes. They were engineers too. And but meanwhile, we are going to adjust this. Maybe it's a euphemism for correcting, but we're going to adjust. Some of the rib vaulting, for example, that got a kind of helter-skelter back 800 some years ago. So we adjusted that. So today they're a perfect harmony and balance, symmetry, all six Gothic bays. And that's another thing. The construction, it's clearly they began with a Romanesque style, and by the time they finished, they were in early Gothic. So it's just fascinating, this building we have, because it shows that you can see it if you're an architectural historian or etc.
Can you tell us a little bit about how Romanesque might be distinguished from the Gothic? And can you see that in the church?
Yeah. Well, Romanesque, of course, it comes from the Roman. So it was the style they preferred to build with in Rome. And this goes back, several thousand years. But it had rounded arches, very heavy walls, and very little window space, because these walls had to support all this, either brick or stone or marble. So very heavy, thick walls, with, as I say, very little window space to let light in. So they're very dark. Well, it's the Moors that actually today architectural historians realize invented, or whatever the word might be, what we call Gothic architecture. Okay. But it caught on quickly in Northern Europe very fast, because you could build tall buildings with very thin walls with lots of window space by the use of flying buttresses. where you put the weight out, up and out, and which a Romanesque structure couldn't and did not do. And so, of course, one of the most famous examples is just the recent restoration of Notre Dame in Paris,
Right.
kind of mid-Gothic building, lots of light, lots of window space, and soaring very, very high. So when they started construction with this, they were using Romanesque, and someone said, they've developed this new architectural style. Why don't we try that? And so they just moved into it. So you've got a blend or a marriage between two different architectural styles in our humble little church here, out here on the plains of Vina. So it's fascinating.
Do you have plans for those other stones that you have stored right now?
Yes and no. Some of the stone we were able to incorporate in some of the landscaping and in some other places, in the buildings, but a lot of it, no. It's but there's still a value, and we're still going to, they're all stored in a brandy barn, and eventually, if we can get things worked out, we'd probably have a better walking tour, and these would be included in part of that walking tour, so people can see these stones today just as they are in their kind of unrestored state. But like I say, we have 2 barns full of these stones.
Yeah, I was able to see some of them when I visited last. It's pretty impressive because you also get a sense of their weight and their size. It's just to see them there. It's amazing to think about the continuity of the place you're in, from the order itself, stretching back centuries, and then this monastery from the 12th century that somehow winds up in California at another monastery of the same order. It's through these important historical figures, it's really amazing. And I'm, having grown up in California, I didn't know about the monastery most of my life. I only recently learned about it, maybe a decade or so ago, which is funny. But I also know that you are a center for spiritual growth and pilgrimage, but you also, as you mentioned, you have a winery. Can you talk a little bit about your winery and what you do in that regard?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. Of course, as I said earlier, one tenet of the rule of St. Benedict is self-support. And so that's very important, that we support ourselves by the labor of our hands. And historically, when we first came, we had a dairy herd. And there were a few prune orchards, but very soon on, the monks, did not want to continue with the dairy herd, because the cows basically control your life. You do not control the life of the cows. So they sold the dairy herd in 1963, and they began to expand not only in prune orchards, but also walnut orchards, which we still have to this day, and which continue to be main sources of income for us. But we always knew about the history of the vineyards and the grape wine industry here. And so it was approximately maybe 30 years ago, the gentleman that has been our contractor for our building projects does have a winery that his family's had for 5 generations over near Napa. And he said, I've always wanted to, plant some vines here in Vina and see what happens and see if maybe we could just prove that Leland Stanford really wasn't a failure, or that, whatever happened, that we could grow some good wines. And so the abbot at the time, Father Thomas Davis, who had the vision with these stones, said, well, I'm interested too. Let's work something out. So we developed a partnership. And in the year 2000, we planted vines. His property is about 3 miles east of here, and slightly different terrain, or terroir, as they call it in the French or the wine industry. But at any rate, so we started this partnership, and then his daughter, Amy Sinceri, said, I'm interested in working on this project. And so she went off to school, got a degree in enology, I think it's called, at UC Davis. Anyway, it's winemaking and grape growing. And so she came on board. And so 25 years later, not only are we producing award-winning wines, but last year even we got named California Winery of the Year, partly because at the state fair, 2 years ago, we won 1 Golden Bear for one of our wines. Last year, we won 3 Golden Bears. So it's almost, Golden Bears are like winning the Oscars. It's a very big deal. At any rate, for 3 of our wines. So anyway, we've proven that we can grow not only good wines, but high quality wines. And our customer base has proven they like our wines. They keep coming back. They have a huge wine club, and we've opened a tasting room up in Reading a year ago that has gone far surpassed what our expectations were for the first year. So it's proven to be very, very popular. So,
well, I can vouch for it. I've had some of your wines, and they are excellent, just from a non-wine connoisseur standpoint. But they are, for my money, they're excellent wines.
Well, thank you. And so that has become a source of income as well, obviously, for us. And a lot of our manual labor is now focused on the vineyard and in the winery, for the self-support. So when the monks go out to work, that will be one of their assignments, either the vineyard, whatever, pruning or thinning or, whatever, weeding. Plus, harvest time, we're all out there cutting grapes by hand, and or we help with the bottling and some of the processing of the wine during the crush season. So so it's turned out to be very, very successful.
So I know that you have as a monk, you have a schedule that's very regulated. So I don't want to keep you longer than you're able to. But just very quickly, people can visit the winery, can visit the monastery. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And do you often get visitors?
Oh, yes. Again, another aspect of our way of life, Dr. Basic, is hospitality. And we have what we call a guest house. Some places might call it a bed and breakfast, but it's similar. But it's a place that's open to anyone who wants to come for whatever reason, a retreat, or just some time away. They're able to share into the prayer life of the monks if they want to. If they don't want to, they can just spend time in the retreat house, the guest house, walking through the orchards, being in nature. We provide meals. That's part of the deal. All 3 meals of the day. Plus, the winery is open every day of the week. And we receive, we were receiving, and I think it's about the same, about 38,000 visitors a year come to the monastery. Generally, those are wine customers, but a number of them come and stay at our guest house for a retreat experience, or just to relax, whatever. Or they may just come for the day to either purchase wine, or many people now know about the church, the medieval church, and they come to see that. So the place has become what we call a destination, and you said earlier, you born and raised here in California, never knew about the monastery until maybe a decade ago. And in one sense, that has always been a characteristic of who we are too. We've always kept a low profile, just by the nature of our contemplative life and a degree of withdrawal or separation from the world's busy, hectic activities. But on the other hand, it sounds like an oxymoron, but but we've always we're a place of welcome, hospitality, of receiving all kinds of people, So anyone is very welcome to come for we'd love to have them come. Yeah.
Well, Father Paul, I really want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us about the monastery, about its history, about your work rebuilding the chapel and the winery. I think it's a very unique place, and we're very fortunate to have such a place here in California that really anybody can visit. And like I said, not only is it a place of pilgrimage, of peace, but it's also a place of a remarkable continuity of over 1,000 years. So I think everybody who is interested should take advantage of the possibility of visiting this wonderful place. And even if you can't, buy some of the New Clairvaux wines, because they're wonderful. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much, Father Paul.
You're very welcome, Dr. Bassett. It's been a great pleasure to spend some time with you and sharing about the history of the monastery, et cetera, and its place in California, and who we are as well. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the California Frontier Show. If you'd like to support the show, the best thing to do is to let other people know about it. If you'd like to support it monetarily, there are a couple ways of doing that. One is by scrolling down in your podcast app to where it says support the show. There you can become a subscriber for as little as $3 a month. And if you want to give a one-time donation, just below you'll see where it says give a one-time donation. Finally, the show is supported by California History Teachers, which is a full year of lessons for 4th grade California history and social studies. You can find out more at www.californiahistoryteachers.com. And if you input the coupon code PODCAST, you'll receive 25% off your monthly or annual subscription. So check it out.